All right, everybody, that's enough waiting. That's enough of the previews, the teasers, the trailers. What are we, a Marvel movie? Anyway, we are going to get started with the webinar, part of our RingPartner University series, and we've got the best practices for call campaigns. Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. My name is Henry Skey. I'm the webinar guru / onboarding / distribution manager / owner of too many titles over here at RingPartner. It's a beautiful day here in Victoria, and we are absolutely thrilled that eZanga is going to be presenting, this webinar. We're really honored to be hosting. We're very lucky that we're going to be hearing a presentation by Eli Martin, who is the Director of Sales for eZanga. He's got a wealth of experience, a lot more than me, if you can believe it, in this regard. So yeah, we're going to get going in just a minute. Before we start, I did want to mention about questions. There's a little tab there that you can write in some questions. We're going to wait until the end to go through those. So Eli's going to do his presentation. We get to listen. Lucky us. And then at the end, I'm going to be looking at some questions that we're going to throw Eli's way, and hopefully he will be able to answer them. All right. Well, without further ado, I hope that's a good enough intro for you, Eli. I didn't mention all the kittens you saved and the children from the burning school bus, but I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later. But take it away, Eli.
All right, absolutely. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Henry and RingPartner. As the honor is as much mine as it is yours, I'm sure. So I obviously got through your introductions here without even having your information on the screen, so my apologies. But so we can let everyone soak this in for a minute, but we'll continue with this and get things going. Just a little bit of my background. I do have 8+ years of experience in digital marketing. So that's pay-per-click advertising, display advertising, things like that. So you're probably wondering, what the heck is someone with pay-per-click advertising experience talking about a pay-per-call? Well, pay-per-call is a relatively new space, and it's something that I actually have 3 years of experience in this market space. And what I found was that there are a lot of parallels, and I was able to use some best practices that I've taken from my years of experience in pay-per-click and display advertising, and really utilize that in the pay-per-call space. And we'll get into a couple of reasons why a little bit down the road, and some of the best practices do parallel a lot. So if you have any history or knowledge in the space in my background, I think you'll find that a lot of it can be applied to pay-per-call. So. And then I do have to say that, yes, history and sports buff, but I had to give a little bit of a rib that someone helped me with this presentation to say that I'm a do-it-yourself protege. So I'm really good at demolition, but I'm not so good at putting things back together. So or at least that's what my wife tells me. So that's kind of where that comes from. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started here. Let's take a look at the agenda. Essentially, I already gave you guys some introductions, so what I really want to cover today is to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page with me, which is to understand the hows and the whys of pay-per-call advertising. So yes, we're going to be talking about best practices, but it really is important to understand how and why we want to utilize pay-per-call advertising. After that, we're really going to want to look at selecting the right type of pay-per-call delivery. And so what do I mean by that is there are different ways in which you can receive pay-per-call advertising, and not all of them are created equal. So I just kind of want to review a little bit of different ways that you can generate these type of phone calls, and that kind of moves into choosing which ones you should be working with. So choosing the right offers. That has a couple different meanings we'll be talking about if you are an affiliate advertiser, or if these are direct phone calls for your business, or if you're working with an agency or as an affiliate. So there's different practices that we'll look at there, and just really try to determine how one type of call works better depending on what you're doing. So after that, we'll get on why it's important to set up tracking. Yes, for some people this may be elementary, but it is of the utmost importance. Always be tracking. That is the first and foremost thing that I pretty much tell everybody when we get things set up. If we're not tracking, we don't know how well we're doing, and it's very difficult to scale. So we will go a little bit in depth in why we need to be tracking properly. We'll also talk about how we actually filter phone calls and how we treat the phone calls when it does come in. So we'll talk about the use of an IVR, the interactive voice response. We'll talk about qualifying a call, what it means to qualify that call that comes in, and then how to leverage the data that we get from this tracking and from the filtering. Finally, we'll talk about how to optimize, hit that all-important ROI. So once we have all this data, once we've got everything set up, how do we scale? So we'll talk about optimizing and then how we scale after that optimization is complete. And then like Henry said at the end, we'll open it up to some questions and we'll take it from there.
Cool.
So anyway, without oops, sorry, Henry.
No, I just want to say before we get into it, this I can already tell this is going to be a really meaty webinar, which I love. And I just want to remind our listeners that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube and Twitter pages as well. So if you missed something, sounds like it's going to be some really good info there. Don't fret, you'll be able to watch it at your leisure. Sorry, Eli. Thanks very much.
No problem. All right, so we'll get started here. So why pay-per-call? Just throw out some numbers right in the beginning and then get some of them out of the way here. So essentially, based on our research, what we found is about 75% of consumers claim that a phone call is the fastest way to get a response from a company. So sometimes there's nothing better than just a good old-fashioned phone call, get somebody on the line and get something taken care of. Part of the reason is sometimes it takes multiple emails, a bunch of tweets to try to get the right person, whatever tactic you're using. Sometimes you can get on the phone, get something done in a couple of minutes, and move on from there. Also, what we found is that up to, this is just make sure we're looking at this as up to, 50% of phone calls can actually result in conversion. Sometimes it's lower than that, but we do see quite a higher conversion rate than in pay-per-call and phone call sales. So basically the reason why we see that is consumers prefer to move from like online or an initial contact advertising to a phone interaction. And what we found is that the average phone call is about 15 times longer than the average website interaction. So that means your typical customer is going to spend 4 minutes on the phone with you, whereas they may spend 15 or 20 seconds online. So you have a lot more time and a lot more potential to actually turn them into a sale or turn them into a conversion or get them what they need to do some business with you. And just a little fun fact about it, the highest volume of calls that occur, sales calls, actually occur on a Tuesday. So I don't know why, but data doesn't lie. So
I was going to say Tuesdays. Tuesdays are always our busiest day too. I wonder why that is.
I don't know, but you're going to ramp it up. Tuesday's the day. So
Tuesday's the day. Good to know.
Yeah. I guess everyone gets out of the Mondays and they're getting into the week, and here we go with Tuesday. So, but anyway, so to continue on with pay-per-call. So, am I saying that I just gave you a bunch of numbers about how good pay-per-call is? Does that mean that we stop all other types of advertising? No, of course not. That's not what I'm saying. I am a big proponent of multi-channel or cross-channel advertising. So keep doing your your digital advertising, video, email marketing, whatever the case is. Essentially what you're doing there is you're making contact with the consumer in multiple phases of the buyer funnel. I'll get to the buyer funnel a little bit later, but that's what you're doing. So you want to consistently make contact with this potential customer. But at the end of the cycle, it may be easier for that potential customer to pick up the phone and call you. So you want to make that process as easy as possible. So in getting back to those numbers a little bit, what we found was we see an increase in conversions, but we sometimes see a reduction in the cost per conversion. So a lot of people initially get shy away a little bit when they hear the price of a call because it's a lot more than what maybe they're paying for a click or something like that. Well, when we back it out and actually look at the CPA or cost per conversion, CPC that way, what we find is, say you're paying $1 a click, and $10 a phone call, I mean, those numbers that we're adding an extra zero, but if you're seeing a much larger conversion rate in pay-per-call, then your cost per conversion will actually go down. So again, I'm not saying shy away from all other types of advertising, but I'm saying this is a wonderful addition to that part of the funnel. So to continue on here, let's talk about that funnel. So inside of this funnel, we basically have, something that we're probably, and if we're in sales or we're in marketing or advertising, we've probably seen some version of this funnel where we have, and I chose awareness, interest, desire, and action. So with awareness, what I look at is you're almost close to that branding side. You want people to know that you exist. You have your banner, you have your, billboard, magazine, whatever the case is, you're in front of the public eye. So when it moves down to the funnel a little bit, we do look at interest. So that interest is closer to the realization that you have a product or service that somebody needs. So they start to show interest. And I believe that desire and action really is where you'll see the pay-per-call side end up. Somewhere in between desire and action. The desire to do business, the desire to take on your services, whatever the case is, and the actual action to pick up that phone and call and find out more information. Let's do some business, see if I'm a good fit. That's somewhere we're going to find ourselves in the pay-per-call funnel. So how does it all work? Again, this may be elementary to some people, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page before we get really into things. Pay-per-call, we are charged by the call, sometimes with your metrics. So what does that mean? That means that essentially what we see is maybe you have a duration, or maybe you have a press 1 for more business. So that's where my background in pay-per-click advertising comes to play, because you're not paying until somebody creates an action. So you don't pay for an ad in pay-per-click until somebody clicks. You don't pay for a call until, well, somebody calls or lasts on the phone for a little bit of time or presses 1 or 2 or whatever the case is. So I think we should all be on the same page with that. But just to get into a little bit more detail, I did talk about that awareness. So you may be working with banners, you may be working with search or something with a billboard. You got that awareness, you created that interest to the potential customer, and they're going to want to pick up the phone and call. You could be generating the call through a TV ad. You could be generating it through mobile click-to-call. You could be generating it through a few different ways that we'll get into a little bit later, but at the end of the day, they call. Most of the time, we're operating with an IVR or some sort of call center qualification that we'll get into some best practices with that as well. And at the end of the day, they're going to turn into a lead. So the call process begins with that awareness. However, we're driving them into the funnel. They end up picking the phone and call. That's where you're paying. You qualify them, and hopefully they're turning into a lead or sale. So essentially, they've passed all the tests. You have a true lead as close to a sale as you're going to get, and that's why we see the conversion rates as high as we do with it. So I mentioned in the last slide a few different ways in which pay-per-call can be delivered. I just picked 4. There's other ways, so don't hold me to these being the only ways, but what we work with is TV commercials, click-to-call, abandoned phone calls, and warm transfer. So real quick, TV commercials. So, we've probably all seen them, the structured settlements or the lawyers or rehabilitation or things like that. Typically, those commercials are created generically enough where that phone number can be sent on to multiple different people that wish to receive a phone call. And that's when we're looking at the types of phone calls that we want to buy, we really need to take a look at the medium in which the phone calls are being generated. And this is where, like I said, the ones that we see on TV, the lawyers, rehabs, structured settlements, tax relief, student debt, things like that. Those are ones that tend to perform well on television. We just all got to think back about what we see late at night or during the day, and those are the ones that tend to perform well on TV. Mm-hmm. We also see click-to-call. So some people refer it to mobile click-to-call. And typically we find that you get some service-based industries. You have your plumber, home improvement, things that somebody would search for on a mobile device. Think about when you pull out your iPhone, what are you searching for? Most likely it's not going to be a structured settlement, but you have a pipe burst in your house and you need a plumber ASAP. So you're doing a quick search, and you need to get that plumber to your house as quickly as possible. Those plumbers should be willing to want to drive those calls in because they know that most of the time people are not going to be doing a search for a plumber or a service-based industry unless they need something, unless they need it fast. So that's why we tend to see some pretty good conversion rates on click-to-call with some service-based industries. It's not the end-all, be-all, but that's typically the direction I move in. I'll touch briefly on abandoned phone calls. Abandoned phone calls essentially are a way for the phone companies to monetize a phone number of a company that's gone out of business. So think about some areas where there are high turnover, so restaurants, mechanics, different areas like that. When you drive by the strip mall and you see a place open today and they're gone tomorrow, what happens to all those phone numbers? Well, essentially, there's a ton of people that still have that phone number on the fridge or in the phone book or wherever the case is, and they pick up the phone and call. When that number is disconnected, we have the ability to say, well, hey, I'm sorry that the restaurant is no longer in business, but if you'd like to, we found 3 similar restaurants in your area. Press 1 for sushi, press 2 for pizza, press 3 for Mexican. So that's just another way we can drive calls. You just got to think about where the high turnover businesses are. And I saved one of the best for last, which is warm transfer. So warm transfer essentially is when someone goes online and fills out a form. A call center contacts them to qualify them a little bit further, and then they get sent on to the client. So essentially, somebody needs auto insurance. They go to a landing page where they fill out a little bit of information about their current status. Call center calls them up and says, hey, I saw that you were looking for auto insurance. That's still something you're looking for? They say yes. Our call center says, great, let me pass you along to somebody who can help you out, and we'll get you set up right away.
Cool.
So you really have to just consider when you're buying different types of pay-per-call inventory, what medium there is, and how different mediums are going to be effective for different verticals, and that's the main crux of this with the type of calls.
Eli, it's you probably spend a good amount of your time trying to convince people, but I mean, when you present it that way, I mean, there's some stuff might get people a little confused, with online methods, search or paid transfer, but it's so easy to understand a TV commercial, right? I mean, there have been phone numbers on TV commercials for decades, right? As long as there's been commercials, so I can imagine it's not actually all that hard trying to convince people that pay-per-call is really a good way to go.
Well, absolutely, because essentially what you're doing is you're taking a lot of the risk and the unknown out of it, because you're essentially only paying for a call. So think about TV as a great example that you used. You could pay for the production of the commercial. You could pay to buy the airtime. So you may be $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 in the hole, who knows, and you haven't received one phone call yet. And you're not guaranteed that you're going to. Same thing works with online advertising. Same thing works with creating a landing page that you're hoping that you can maybe do SEO or buy traffic to have somebody fill out a form, but you're not guaranteed that's going to happen once. So we're trying to take all of that out of the equation, and one of the best selling points that we tell people about is, yes, that's all out of the equation. You're only paying when you get that call. And I think that's really important for people to just make sure they understand is, yeah, all that other risk is out of the equation. You're only paying for it when you actually receive that phone call of somebody that wants to do some business with you.
For sure, for
so
sure.
Hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
Alrighty, so we'll go on here. So like I said in my intro, I work with some direct advertisers and affiliates, and what I've typically found in this space is that depending on whether you're an affiliate or a direct buyer, you might want to look at how you're selecting your campaign. So working with an affiliate network or an agency, there are some great benefits to working with them. They can hand select campaigns that they know are going to work best for your type of calls, or vice versa. If you have phone calls that the affiliate wants to buy, they can help you find what the best practice is. And they have data to back this up. So these are people that are in the industry. They've been doing this for a while, and they have the ability to point you in the right direction, because if you're not making money, they're not making money. So it's in their best interest to really make sure that they're putting you in the best position to succeed. On the flip side, you have a direct buyer. So you might work directly with insurance company or something like that. Benefits to them is that they may have some better payouts because there's not the middling of the affiliate network, but you might find that you're working with somebody who has less experience in the call space. And maybe they have a short leash on you because they're not really sure about testing, or they don't know how many calls it does take to actually create a sale. And so you might be working with someone that may not give you the time or the effort to get it in. They just want you to go do it yourself. So you might be hanging out there. But at the same time, if you make it work, you might see a better payout. So there's definitely benefits to working both ways. I'm not saying go one or the other. If you can afford the opportunity, try both and see what works best for you. And some people prefer to be a do-it-yourselfer, and others prefer to have a right-hand man helping them out. And both can be very lucrative if you position yourself correctly.
Cool.
So absolutely. So the all-important call tracking. Well, essentially, I wouldn't even start a campaign with anybody until they're tracking their campaign. I need to know what's working, and I need to know what's not working. So it's in my best interest, and it's in my client's best interest that when we set up a campaign, we're properly tracking. It helps you manage your ROI. It helps you optimize. It presents an opportunity for quality assurance. If you're recording the call, it helps you manage and provide feedback to your client. So these are all things that are just incredibly important to the success of a campaign. So there's a few different call tracking platforms out there. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Invoca or Mongoose, or there's some others. And they all have their benefits, and they all at least give you the ability to track. I'm not going to get into the different types, but it's just really important to make sure that you got yourself set up and tracking. Because if there's ever an issue, you need to be able to pinpoint what the problem is, take care of it, and move forward as effectively as possible. Plus, too, again, depending on who you're working with or what the setup is, you may be held to some data, and you have to prove yourself, and you have to show, yes, I did generate these calls. Yes, the durations do look incredible. Yes, we are converting at a great rate, and here's the data to back it up. So yes, ABT, always be tracking for sure.
Eli, do you know any successful partners that are doing this without call tracking? I can't think of any.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm vehement about it. I mean, you have to be tracking, or sometimes it's harsh what I'll say, but if you don't track, you will fail.
Right.
It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but eventually you're going to see. You might get lucky, and you might have the campaign start off the bat great. Without any tracking. But all it takes is a little tiny metric or something to get out of whack, and all of a sudden you see the campaign crash and burn. You don't know what the heck happened. So, basically set yourself up for success. Make sure you're tracking for sure.
Tough but fair. Yeah, I say this all the time. It's a tough enough industry without you sort of putting up hurdles for yourself. You want to remove any kind of obstacles, so that's a pretty easy one to get rid of right out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I said I wasn't going to really get into too much of the different types of companies, but at least when you're vetting out a company, I just gave a couple things that you might want to check off your checklist. You want to make sure that you can get call information. So sounds simple, but you want to make sure that you can see maybe a caller ID, a duration of the call, where the call is coming from. So it'll give you the geos. They should be able to provide you with a number. It could be a local 1-800 number. It depends on the type of campaign that you're doing, but sometimes you're going to need to make sure you have a dedicated number, so that way you can unequivocally know that through your advertising and your pay-per-call buying, that's what is generating the sale. If if you're just sending calls to the same number, you're not really going to be able to tell what is you and what is another form of marketing. So you got to make sure that you have a number. And also, too, make sure that tracking system gives you access to reports, because you may need to show these to a client. You may need to show it to somebody else. You may need to look at yourself a lot.
Right.
So just make sure that you have the ability to look at these reports, either to give to yourself or a client. And then finally, make sure that it's a positive call experience. I'm going to get into a little bit later what I mean by that, but essentially if you need to utilize an IVR, that maybe the tracking system has that into play to help you filter through some calls. But you want to make it a good positive user experience, because everyone rolls their eyes as soon as they hear the robot come on, but if you do it in the right way, it actually streamlines the process rather than causing a hurdle for somebody.
Right.
And so if you can tie all that together inside of your own tracking system, so you get your phone number, you get your IVR, you get your reports, then you're set up for success. So yeah, hopefully whatever you choose tends to have the majority of these things in there. If not, you might want to look elsewhere for a different tracking company. So IVR. So just as we were talking about it, IVR, again, is interactive voice response. So essentially that's whenever you call up somebody and you hear press 1 for this, but it's not a human, it's a recording. So it's not a live human. Most of the time it is a recording. But the reason why we look at this is so when a caller contacts your company and they're greeted by an IVR, we usually give them a quick prompt. And that quick prompt is really to just help that, we're asking a series of questions to qualify the call. We can send them on to the most appropriate agent, maybe an agent that has higher conversions, and then we can provide them with another number if they're not a good fit. So that's what's important too, because we still want to give people a good user experience. If they're not qualified, but there might be another outlet in which they can get help or get a sale, then we'll provide them with that number. But we're all keeping in the back of our mind that most of the time it's pay per call and we're paying on a duration. So we make sure we get that IVR light and tight to make sure that we're asking the questions that will filter out maybe a misdial or a wrong number or something like that, and get right down to the person that's going to be the best potential for a close. So IVR is definitely important, especially depending on the medium that you're buying the call. It's just will help immensely. So when should we use it, and why really? And again, as I mentioned, we'll filter out some misdials. So you might be using a phone number that's one off from a popular number. Like my house growing up, my phone number was one number away from the YMCA. So we would always get phone calls, people asking when the YMCA was open, what time does the pool close, all of this kind of stuff, to the point where we just ended up changing the phone number. So if we are working with a phone number that we've generated that is very close to a popular phone number, we might see some people with some chubby fingers make a misdial, and if you're paying for these calls, you want to make sure that you can filter this out before it hits your pocketbook. Same thing with a hang-up. Somebody goes, you know what, I don't really want to call right now. Or the dreaded dead air, it might just be a bad connection, whatever the case is. IVR will help filter out all of that. And the next step with the IVR really helps you route the calls to a different department, or if you're on the affiliate level, maybe a different vendor. So you can qualify a call and then determine where the best place to send this call will be. And when you really determine that, that's going to really help you start to optimize. We'll get into the optimization a little bit later, but this is the beginning when you have your IVR to help that filtering process. So that's why I was talking about with prioritizing the calls based on value. I mean, at the end of the day, you want phone calls that are coming in that are going to generate you business, put money in your pocket. And if you can filter it out and optimize it, life will be good. It also helps you handle a large number of calls. So you don't want to burden, if you have a call center or maybe you're just one or two people, you don't want to burden yourself with a large number of calls if they're not qualified. Because what's going to end up happening is, more and more agents see that phone number pop up and they know it's the potential to be dead air. Well, dead air doesn't put money in their pockets either. So they need to make sure that the phone calls coming on the other line is going to be somebody that has a true deal to want to do some business with you. So and at the end of the day, depending on, you could be a large outfit or a small outfit, it helps improve your professionalism a little bit. What you see is, when you have an IVR, you could come off as you could have two people answering the phones, but you come off as quite the large professional organization because you're handling the calls in a proper manner, not just answering the phone. Hello, so it definitely adds that air a little bit.
Yeah, in a way, Eli, for call campaigns, I mean, the IVR is closer to your landing page than your actual landing page in a way. We found that, even the slightest change in verbiage or in, any kind of words or emphasis really in the IVR can really lead people to, be comfortable with, with the IVR and confirms that they've called in the right service versus like maybe an IVR that's too short or too long or not informative enough or not friendly enough, and they'll just hang up or they'll get stuck in, IVR hell, and nobody, we've all been there, and it's just a good way to lose the mail.
Yeah, nobody likes that. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that we see, and I'll address it in the next slide, is how you order your questions is immensely important. Think back to the days when you're messing around with a landing page. You could change the color of a landing page and see your conversions change. Mm-hmm. So that the same thing happens with an IVR. It's the simple little tweak, but that's why it's got to be tracking, got to always be testing. And what we end up seeing is we want to make sure that we're asking pre-qualification questions, like you mentioned, and that the order of the questions are as such that we can quickly and definitively pre-qualify the caller and make sure that we're putting them in the best position and putting our agents or whoever's answering the phone in the best position to succeed. So you're absolutely right. How we order the questions is immensely important. We want to make sure that we're asking the key questions up front. So that way, if we are on a duration crunch, that there's certain maybe geos or certain, like if you have tax debt of less than $10,000, but your offer is only for a tax debt of $10,000 or more, let's get some of those questions out a little bit earlier, see if they're out of state, see what the insurance they have, whatever the case is, but just make sure that we're getting it in an order that is efficient and effective. So moving on from the IVR a little bit, as you were talking about a landing page, Henry, is there's actually a way with the call center to be able to capture that landing page information. So when I talked about, think back many slides ago when I talked about warm transfers, essentially with those warm transfers, somebody's filling out a form. So just like you said, Henry, that sometimes people hate getting caught up in the IVR rotation.
Right.
People hate even just as much, I think, having to repeat themselves.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So when you get on the phone finally with an agent, somebody that can help you, and they ask you the same question that was just asked by somebody else that transferred you, that drives you nuts, mm-hmm. right? Well, there's actually the ability, and if you have this ability, whether it's your call center or the call center that you're working with or whoever you're buying calls from has this ability, I highly recommend that you post data. So without getting into too many technical details, essentially what we're looking for is when that agent calls out that lead with a warm transfer and they say, oh, so what is your name, phone number, you're absolutely looking for that insurance, correct? Great. I'm going to put you on the line with a representative who can help you out with this. Instantly, they will send that information over, so when the rep actually has them on the phone, it will have produced in their CRM or whatever system that they're using. It'll pop up on their screen, oh, here's Mary giving us a call. So they don't have to backtrack. They can continue with the flow, and that's, again, it's all about user experience, right? You want to increase your conversions. You'll see that they'll definitely increase when somebody doesn't get upset that they have to repeat the information that they, A, already filled out on a form, B, already talked to one person who's doing the warm transfer, and now they have to do it a third time. That's probably where they're going to draw the line sometimes.
And listeners, so Eli's only going to be doing this webinar once, but we will be recording it. So don't worry, Eli, you're only going to have to tell us this once.
Okay, good. Good stuff. But yeah, so absolutely, if we can post data, let's see if we can do that here. So finally, we've looked at our call treatment. We've found the right type of calls. Calls are coming in now. We're tracking it all properly. So how do we optimize? Well, at the end of the day, it's what's going to make us some money. So we really want to look at, first and foremost, just our closing percentage. Where do we start out? Are we relatively smooth with the conversions? Are they increasing a lot? Are they decreasing? What's going on? And just a brief overview, if you want to look at like an executive level of this, you just look at the duration of the call, right? Typically, you see that the longer durations are something that tend to turn into more sales or conversions. If not, that's something to dive into with your optimization. Check on the geos, see where the calls are coming from, and then at the end of the day, when you see these calls coming in, if there are certain clients or certain agents or whatever the case is that are producing more sales, you want to make sure that you're routing the calls to the most effective place. So when you keep the closing percentage in mind, when it's steady, check on those geos, because you might see that Florida performs a lot better than Texas. Well, I'm going to try to shift my geo-targeting capabilities to states that are doing a little bit better for me if I have that ability.
Right.
And then so let's just say, let's give a perfect world scenario. I've hit the geos that I need. I have some superstar agents on the phone, or I have I've really honed in on and discovered some great partners to work with, and now I believe that it's time to really start to make some money. So what do? I have to scale at some point. Otherwise, what am I doing? So really, you want to do this when you have honed in on all of that call treatment, so the IVR is down pat, whoever's answering the phone's trained up, ready to rock, and we got the right distribution partners. And so you'll typically see a leveling out or a steady closing percentage of these calls. At that point, you'll have an idea, I close 20% of my calls, or I close 25, whatever the case is. That's where it gives you the opportunity and gives you the leverage to secure a bigger buy, right? So you have the ability to say, hey, listen, for the past 2 weeks or the past month or however long, I've maintained quite a steady closing percentage with you. Let's see if we can increase your demand, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that we find there is if you get somebody, whether it's your client or the person that you're working with, to commit to a bigger buy, usually you have a little bit more leverage in working out a better payout. So, you're basically assuring them, and you're basically working with them to say, I'm going to add another 0 to the end of the number of phone calls I could generate for you. So why don't you see if there's any type of wiggle room to work on my margin a little bit? And so that's how you really can optimize and hit that ROI. And then finally, just make sure when you do this that you have the necessary resources, because there's nothing people, again, hate more than getting a voicemail, right? You're ready to buy. You're ready to do something, and please hold. That's not what you want to have happen. Right. So make sure that you have enough people answering the phones. Make sure that because at the end of the day, you don't want to see a qualified call go to voicemail. I mean, that's like, man, like who knows what would have happened? Say 15 or 20% or however many percent of these calls are going unanswered. Man, just imagine what you're missing out on when you could have just open up a few more seats in a call center, or just work with the client to make sure that they're handling correctly, or if they weren't using an IVR before, that's great information to tell them now. Because if they can't handle the volume of calls because of whatever reason, they're not using an IVR, let's get that in there and let's get that rocking. So I do, I flowed through this pretty quickly, and I do want to make sure that probably if I were to give any parting words is really make sure that you're keeping tabs on your campaign. Don't get complacent. Because what ends up happening is when you think you can set something in cruise control and you stop paying as much attention to it, that's where you find yourself getting into trouble. So, I use the old sports cliche of I always act like the scoreboard's nothing. So I always want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to squeeze, everything I can out of the campaign. If something needs to be changed, I'm going to make that change to make things better. And finally, always be testing. Again, that kind of goes with complacency, right? Just make sure that maybe there's a new offer. Why not test it? It might be something that is going to be fruitful. If there's another vendor out there who has the ability to increase your the amount of calls you receive by 20%, that could be 20% that you'll see in increased sales. So, at the end of the day, always be testing, don't be complacent, and I think if you're tracking properly and using some of these tactics and tools, you'll at least put yourself in the best position to succeed. And at the end of the day, if you utilize these things, I think you'll find that you'll at least get off on the right foot. Let's just call it that.
For sure. No, that's great, Eli. Thank you so much. Definitely a meaty presentation, like I mentioned. If everybody, we've got a lot of questions coming in, so definitely get yours in quickly. We'll try and do a first come, first serve basis here. Eli, I'll start with this one. What have you seen as sort of like a trend? I mean, you've got quite a bit of experience. What do you see as sort of the latest trend in pay-per-call? Are we heading towards something really big, or is it kind of plateauing, or what do you see as like kind of the major up and coming, maybe a prediction for 2016?
Gotcha. Well, it might not be so much as a trend as just what I see as just a major focus point. I mean, and it's obvious, I think, to a lot of people that you see mobile advertising and click-to-call as just this kind of a juggernaut here. Everyone at this point, or the majority of people, have a smartphone in some way, shape, or form. The ability to look something up online is pretty simple to do, and the ability to actually connect with somebody by simply one click and they're on the phone with somebody, that creates an easy user experience. So again, we want to remove the barriers from we want to remove the ability, or we want to make it actually as least difficult as possible. That was easy for me to say, right? To get on the phone with us and talk to us, so we can turn them into our customer. So again, this may not be earth-shattering information, but at the end of the day, I think that there are some really good partners out there that are doing some great stuff with mobile click-to-call. And then on the flip side, I mean, that there's still the old-fashioned, filling out the form on, like, come on, calling it old-fashioned, it's been like 10 years, but filling out a form online, and where that used to kind of just fall into a little bit of a rabbit hole. If you're set up properly to be able to transfer somebody on when you recontact them, continuing that contact.
For sure.
I think that's what we see.
Okay.
So
that's
long answer, but hopefully it helped.
Hey, that's all right. We're here to chat. That's fine. Eli, here's one of the questions I don't know how much in depth we want to go into here, but someone's asking.
Sure.
It's a good question. How do you monitor for TCPA compliance and fraudulent advertising practices? And maybe just go into, if you could, maybe just a small blurb about your guys' compliance methods and basically what we do as an industry to combat fraud, because I mean really it hurts us all.
Absolutely. So, well, the first thing I'll say is there are several call tracking companies out there that have begun to put in place ways to filter a call a little bit. So some of the ways you see fraud is these robocalls. Mm-hmm. I think they're like call thumping or whatever you want to call it. You'll end up hearing a recording. So when you pick up the phone to answer, it just sounds like somebody's like midstream talking to you, but it's just a recording. So there's actually some pretty neat technology out there at this point of people that have the ability, as the call is being transferred, so as it's like basically hitting the switchboard from one phone number to another, that recording's going. So there's technology out there that can recognize this and shut the call down before that even happens. And some of them offer that service as just, in addition to what you're doing. Some of it you have to pay for, but at the end of the day, sometimes if you pay a little bit for a filter, that's gonna save you a lot of headache in the long run. That can be something that's pretty beneficial. As far as TCPA compliance, you have to hold all your vendors accountable. I mean, that's something that, at this point, everyone's aware of this. TCPA actually started in, I think, 91, but, this compliance has a whole new meaning to the pay-per-call world. So, the pay-per-call world's new, TCPA is not. So there's a lot of people that are already using those practices, the companies that have been around. But in your contract or in your language, you need to make just unequivocally sure that you are covering all your bases with TCPA. And my recommendation, if somebody is not willing to match you with what you're asking for to be TCPA compliant, you don't want to work with them. It's just going to end up, it's not going to end well for you or them. So I think that the biggest thing is that get yourself a little bit familiar with the language in TCPA and just hold people accountable, whether it's in a contract or whatever the case is, to make sure that they're following those best practices. Sometimes it's as simple on a landing page as having a checkbox saying that, with the language proper in there, saying that, yes, you may be on a do not call list. However, by entering this information, you're waiving that right. Whatever the case is, but obviously it's more than that. We probably don't have too much time to get into that, but just make sure that you're holding everybody accountable, whether it's your vendors or on the other side.
For sure. Very cool. Eli, here's a good question. You may have covered this tiny bit earlier, but we see obviously the data is there for for calls coming in. Is there still a huge difference between let's say mobile devices versus desktop? I guess desktop search or social. Are you seeing a trend of one over the other?
As far as like the volume coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely shifted as well in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing I've found is it depends on the industry, and it depends on the time of day. So during the day you'll see a little bit more desktop generated to phone. So they're looking at it on the desktop and they're picking up the phone. Because a lot of people are at work, so they're typically in front of their computer that way. Then towards the later part in the day, they may be at home and they're on their phones, they're on a tablet, or whatever the case is. They're not, sitting in the office in their house on the desktop. They're, with the family. They're watching, TV, and they're all tooling around on their tablets because we can't have enough screens in front of our face, right? So I think that, yeah, there's definitely the volume comes from the mobile side. However, I think that if you have a little bit more of a high-end conversion, I've tended to see that come a little bit more from the desktop side, just because I think people are in a different part of the funnel. They're doing a little bit more research. They're not going to be so quick to just do a quick search, see the first phone that pops up on their mobile phone and call it. They might be doing a little bit more. So it just really all depends on what your vertical is, how much volume that you'll see for it.
For sure. I agree completely, Eli. I was hoping that I could pick apart one of your arguments and make myself feel smart, but just can't. You're too well prepared. You're too invested in this. You've been doing this a long time, obviously, and that looks like the end of all the questions that we can answer today. So, everybody, I want to thank you all for joining us. It was a really informative webinar. Obviously, primary thanks to Eli and eZanga for presenting. Eli, you did a great job. Thanks very much. And you can follow us you'll be able to follow us on Twitter at RingPartner. This webinar, again, will be made available. It is being recorded. You'll be able to find that on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/RingPartner. Find us on Facebook. Give us a call. Give us an email. And Eli, where and how can we contact eZanga?
Oh, absolutely. So you can actually follow us too. You can follow me at eZanga Eli, or follow us at eZanga Inc. You can go to eZanga.com and find out everything that we have to offer. I think you'll be surprised to find that pay-per-call is not the only thing we have to offer. So I'll leave that little tidbit of information for you and see what else we have to offer by visiting the website at eZanga.com.
What a tasty morsel! It's like a
right? A little teaser.
It's like a cliffhanger. Fantastic. Well, great job, Eli. Again, thank you so much. And guys, look for further collaborations with RingPartner and eZanga, hopefully in 2016. And everybody have a great day. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.